For many, the idea of a home represents stability, safety, and a place to build a future. But for millions of Americans, that sense of security is shattered the moment an eviction notice arrives. In an instant, people find themselves uprooted, oftentimes without a place to go. This is the harsh reality for many, as eviction levels reach new highs in several states.
Housing's too expensive. I mean, that's why people get evicted, right? 90% of evictions, give or take. I mean, the vast majority of evictions are filed because someone missed the rent, right? Or at least that's the stated claim in the eviction filing. So if we want to solve this crisis, you either need to make rent more affordable or people need more money to spend on rent, or both.
That's Carl Gershenson, director of the Eviction Lab at Princeton University. The Eviction Lab was founded in 2017 by Matthew Desmond, author of the book Evicted: Poverty and Profit in the American City. At the time, Desmond's mission was to create the first national database of eviction records.
After the success of that book, there were a lot more people talking about the problem of evictions and housing insecurity. But, as it turns out, the federal government, state governments, county governments, no one was actually collecting data on this issue. So there was no way to say how many people are evicted a year. Where are evictions worse? Are evictions trending up or trending down?
According to the Eviction Lab, landlords in the U.S. have filed more than 1 million evictions over the past year. In 2024, Maricopa County in Arizona saw the most evictions filed in 20 years. And in Denver, Colorado, eviction cases are up 80% compared to before the COVID pandemic. Gershenson says tracking this data allows researchers to better understand the causes and consequences of housing insecurity in America. So, what factors drive rent prices, and what is causing rents to increase?
If you think about two apartment units on the same street, which one's going to rent for more? The bigger one's going to rent for more than the smaller one. The newer, nicer one's going to rent for more than the older one, right? But we can think about, why are rent levels different across cities? Why San Francisco have higher rents than Cleveland? And there, it's not about quality of housing stock, right? I mean, California is famous for having really old, really small cottages rent for thousands and thousands of dollars, something you could get for, $500 in Cleveland. So what's going on there is incomes are really, really high in San Francisco. A lot of people want to move there, and there's insufficient housing stock, so people bid up the price.
The rent is not a measure of the quality or condition of our homes. The rent is a measure simply of whatever the market will allow. And it's landlords who are actually the architects of that market. And what we've seen in recent years, really the last several decades, is a market that is entirely skewed towards maximizing landlords' profit at the tenant's expense.
That's Tara Raghavir, director of the nonprofit Tenant Union Federation. Over the past few years, the organization has established tenant unions in cities across the country, including Lexington, Kentucky, Bozeman, Montana, and Chicago, Illinois. Raghavir says the group helps tenants organize to get repairs done and helps negotiate protections. They also work to guarantee renters have access to attorneys in eviction court. Both Raghavir and Gershenson agree that when rents rise, people are left with limited options.
If you get evicted in a city like San Francisco, in a city like New York City, let's say that you had one of those very few, very precious, affordable apartments in San Francisco, you're paying $1,000 a month. When you get evicted, you're not finding an apartment like that again.
Many, many people end up homeless because of evictions, some seasonally or sort of episodically homeless, and others chronically homeless. Eviction is not just the event itself, but it can also have consequences on your ability to get to and from work, the kids' ability to get to school. There's mental health and physical health consequences to eviction. And of course, there's financial implications. People's wages are garnished after evictions, and that can leave people in an even deeper hole that's more difficult to get out of as well.
Although the Eviction Lab data has provided insights into trends and patterns, Raghavir says this type of formal data only captures a piece of the full picture.
There's about 49 eviction filings every business day in Kansas City. And those are just the formal evictions. I think that was always my problem with the eviction research, is that we were only able to capture the numbers that were available to us through the court system. But more and more these days, what we're seeing is informal evictions, like when the rent is increased to a level that a tenant cannot afford and they're forced to move. That is what we would consider an eviction as well. That's a forced displacement. There's conditions issues that are leading people to leave their homes because they're uninhabitable to them. And then landlords are also taking liberties to deny tenants lease renewals. And that can be another form of forced displacement as well.
But aren't there tenancy laws that prevent price gouging and protect renters from unfair rent hikes? In many places there are, but Gershenson says renters often don't know their rights until it's too late.
If a landlord tells a tenant, hey, you're evicted, get out of my unit, a large percentage of tenants will comply, sort of either unaware of what the formal eviction process should look like, or maybe they reason, the formal legal process isn't going to protect me. My landlord is more powerful, more connected than I am. The law doesn't tend to favor renters. They might just choose to get out. So, this is why it's important that tenants, one, know their rights, and two, that there is local organizational infrastructure to actually help tenants and claim their rights.
It might not be easy or possible for every tenant to join a union. People can fear landlord retaliation. There can be a lack of awareness about tenant rights, and it can be hard to organize large groups of people with different interests. But Gershenson says every level of government has a role to play in creating fair housing policies.
A lot of housing policy is set at the state level or at the county level. So to some extent, we don't expect federal action, say, on landlord-tenant law. The most important issues that the federal government deals with are funding for public housing authorities, funding for housing choice vouchers, funding for project-based vouchers.
According to the Eviction Lab, only about 1 in every 4 of the people who qualify for housing assistance actually receive it. And Gershenson says in many cases, the so-called cost of homelessness far outprices what it would cost state and local governments to actually keep people in their apartments.
The amount that the federal government and local governments spend on each homeless person is enormous. You can talk about costs like emergency room visits, emergency shelters, there's policing costs. The cost to clear out encampments is also really large. You look at everything that we spend dealing with the far, far, far downstream consequences of housing instability. And, it's in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands per case.
In 2024, the federal government awarded more than $3 billion in homeless assistance funding to communities nationwide. But the impact of this funding on eviction rates remains unclear, and it's still uncertain what the future of federal funding will look like in terms of tackling housing insecurity. You can find more about the Eviction Lab and the Tenant Union Federation by visiting our website at viewpointsradio.org. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Instagram, X, and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Polly Hansen. Our lead producer is Libby Foster. Our executive producer is Amira Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.